All right, we start tonight with a stunning piece of investigative reporting from Paul Sperry. Now, we have told you that the 2 Republican memos about severe FISA abuses, we gave you all the details, and the unconstitutional spying on the Trump campaign, we told you this is just the beginning of what is coming. Well, tonight there's a new development in this massive scandal. Now, according to Sperry, the House Intelligence Committee is now focusing on several key former Obama intelligence officials, which include John Brennan and James Clapper and their connections to the Steele dossier that was filled with Hillary Clinton bought and paid for Russian lies. Let's start with the former CIA director, John Brennan. Now, according to Paul Sperry's new reporting, the House Intel Committee is investigating whether or not Brennan committed perjury when testifying under oath about the dossier. Now, here's what Brennan said back in May of 2017. Pay close attention.
Director Brennan, do you know who commissioned the Steele dossier?
I don't.
Do you know if the Bureau ever relied on the Steele dossier as part of any court filings, applications, petitions, pleadings?
I have no awareness.
Did the CIA rely on it?
No.
Why not?
Because we didn't. It wasn't part of the corpus of intelligence information that we had. It was not in any way used as a basis for the intelligence community assessment that was done. It was not.
So we're to believe John Brennan, the former head of the CIA, claiming under oath that he had no idea that Hillary Clinton and the DNC paid over, what, $12 million to finance the salacious, unverified dossier that used even Russian government sources? Now, that was in May of 2017. We now know from the GOP memos that approximately 7 months earlier, in October of 2016, that the FBI, the DOJ, they were using that dossier as the bulk of the FISA application to get the warrant to spy on the Trump campaign associate Carter Page. Now, we've also discovered that the FBI and the DOJ lied to the FISA court judge. They never told the judge, although they knew it, that Clinton paid for the dossier. Instead, they thought they were clever. They put a little footnote in the application about the dossier perhaps having some political affiliation. So Brennan was either the most uninformed CIA director in the history of the country, or was he lying to Congress? Now, that's just the start of Brennan's problems. Now, Paul Sperry is also discovering how Brennan allegedly pushed information about this dossier to the FBI and Democratic leaders. Now, a congressional source is telling Sperry, quote, John Brennan did more than anyone to promulgate the dirty dossier. He politicized and effectively weaponized what was false intelligence against Donald Trump. And then Paul Sperry gives further details about Brennan's efforts to damage the Trump campaign with the phony dossier. And according to numerous reports, on August the 25th, 2016, Brennan briefed the former Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid about what he said was Russia trying to help Trump win the election. And 2 days later, Senator Reid fires off a letter to James Comey demanding the FBI investigate the Trump campaign for colluding with the Russians. Now, Reid wrote in part, quote, the evidence of direct connection between the Russian government and Donald Trump's presidential campaign continues to mount. And then Reid goes on to specifically mention an allegation from the phony dossier about a Trump campaign associate going to Moscow in July of 2016. We know who that person was. That was Carter Page. Weird. How would then Senator Reid have known that? Did Brennan, a couple of days earlier, did he brief Reid about the fake news document put together by Christopher Steele that was paid for by Hillary Clinton? Now, Reid publicly encouraged the FBI to investigate the Trump campaign. Now, that's called, the way I look at it, trying to influence an election. But that wasn't Reid's only attempt to do so. Now, the former senator put out a second letter to Comey just before the election in October of 2016, and he writes this: in my communications with you and other top officials in the national security community, it has become clear that you possess explosive information about close ties and coordination between Donald Trump and his top advisors and the Russian government. Okay, who are the top officials Harry Reid's talking about? Was it Brennan? Now, we know from reports that Reid was briefed by the former CIA director, and that was before the election. Now, as for after the election, Paul Sperry is reporting that Brennan had information from the Steele dossier included in the president's daily intelligence briefing. Now, those details were then leaked to the press, and CNN, the Washington Post, New York Times, they all reported on it. And then months later, when testifying, Brennan then said that details from the dossier weren't good enough to include in the January 2017 Intelligence Community Report about Russian election interference. Okay, they used it in October to get the FISA warrant. So despite all of these facts, all this information, Brennan still appears to be claiming he knows nothing about the dossier. Now, here's what he said on Meet the Press earlier this month. Take a close listen.
When did you first learn of the so-called Steele dossier and what Christopher Steele was doing?
Well, it was not a very well-kept secret among press circles for several months before it came out. And it was in late summer of 2016 when there were some individuals from the various U.S. news outlets who asked me about my familiarity with it. And I had heard just snippets about it. I did not know what was in there. I did not see it until later in that year. I think it was in December. But I was unaware of the provenance of it as well as what was in it. And it did not play any role whatsoever in the intelligence community assessment that was done, that was presented to then President Obama and then President-elect Trump.
All right, tonight Brennan clearly has some explaining to do. If Brennan didn't know much about the dossier and he didn't see the entire thing until a month after the election, then why was Harry Reid specifically referencing it in August of 2016 after being briefed by Brennan? And why, according to Sperry, did Brennan insist that information about the dossier be included in President Obama's daily intelligence briefing? Now, those are just some of the major burning questions that John Brennan has to answer tonight. Now, Paul Sperry is also reporting that the former Obama Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, he is now facing scrutiny. Now, serious questions are being raised about what Clapper told fake news CNN about the dossier back in October 2017. Let's watch him.
With respect to the dossier itself, the key thing is, it doesn't matter who paid for it. It's what the dossier said and the extent to which it's corroborated or not. We had some concerns about it from the standpoint of its sourcing, which we couldn't corroborate. But at the same time, some of the substantive content, not all of it, but some of the substantive content of the dossier, we were able to corroborate in our intelligence community assessment, which from other sources, in which we had a very high confidence level.
All right, that's fascinating, because it looks like going back to October, there's Clapper. He's trying to lay the groundwork for the argument that, oh, it doesn't really matter that Hillary Clinton paid for the Russian dossier with Russian government lies, all in an effort to lie to the American people and influence an election. And it appears Clapper is also trying to cover his tracks because the Obama administration knew well before then that Clinton shelled out, over $12 million dossier dollars for Christopher Steele to write this Russian propaganda. Now, the other fascinating aspect that Sperry points out about Clapper's comments, Clapper claims that some parts of the dossier were corroborated. All right, the question is, which ones and how? Now, remember, the House Intelligence Committee memo exposes how, in their application for that FISA warrant, that the FBI says it verified the dossier with the Yahoo News article that was written by Michael Isikoff, and Michael Isikoff's source was Christopher Steele. So the FBI never actually independently verified any of this. So is that what Clapper's talking about? So it's time now for both Brennan and Clapper to face Congress. They now need to go back under oath and talk about what they knew, what they found when they found it. Now, we did reach out to Harry Reid, John Brennan, and James Clapper for comment. They didn't get back to us. I'm not going to hold my breath. Now, also brand new tonight, pressure is mounting on former Obama National Security Advisor Susan Rice to start answering questions. Why did she email herself on President Trump's inauguration day about an important meeting that President Obama had with former FBI Director Comey way back 15 days earlier on January 5th? Now, Senators Grassley and Graham are out with a letter demanding that Rice explain herself. And according to the senators, they discussed the January 5th email as part of a National Archives request about meetings between President Obama and former FBI Director James Comey regarding the Bureau's Russia investigation. So in the email to herself, let me send an email to self, which Senator Graham is calling, quote, disturbing, Rice writes, President Obama began the conversation by stressing his continued commitment to ensuring that every aspect of this issue is handled by the intelligence and law enforcement communities by the book. The president stressed that he is not asking about initiating or instructing anything from a law enforcement perspective. He reiterated that our law enforcement team needs to proceed as it normally would by the book. From a national security perspective, however, President Obama said he wants to be sure, as we engage with the incoming team, that we are mindful to ascertain if there is any reason that we cannot share information fully as it relates to Russia. What's his role in this? Now, the next part of that is redacted. And before we continue, why would the president not want to share information with the Trump transition team? What does he think might have happened? Who told him what, when, and where? Remember, Obama did amend the executive order 12333 that allowed the widespread sharing of NSA raw information across 16 intelligence agencies, but he didn't live with that rule under his administration. Rice then continues, quote, the president asked Comey to inform him if anything changes in the next few weeks that should affect how we share classified information with the incoming team. Comey said he would. Now, in a statement to FoxNews.com, Susan Rice's attorney, she's claiming tonight that what she did was not unusual, was merely an attempt for Rice to memorialize the meeting for the record. Okay, 15 days later, and then Rice's attorney also attacked Grassley and Graham for daring to ask a question. It's all very, very strange. There's more to this story, that I can promise you, and eventually we will unpeel that onion. It will be investigated. Now, also tonight, great reporting, Rowan Scarborough from the Washington Times. He's highlighting all the allegations in this phony dossier that have yet to be verified. What, 20 months later? And Scarborough is writing how it's been 20 months since former British spy Christopher Steele first went to the FBI, and he points out 10 major accusations from the dossier that have never been verified. We'll give you the top 5 for the constraints of time. The Trump campaign launched an extensive conspiracy with the Kremlin to interfere in the 2016 presidential election. Scarborough notes, rightly so, it hasn't been verified. Mr. Trump, for decades a developer of tall buildings, maintained an 8-year relationship of give and take with Russian intelligence. Not verified. Mr. Trump and senior campaign aides actively supported the Russian hacking of Democratic Party computers to steal and release stolen emails. Okay, never verified. Carter Page and campaign manager Paul Manafort personally conspired with Moscow to hack the Democrats' computers. That wasn't verified either. And by the way, the hacking started in 2015, and neither Page nor Manafort were part of the campaign then, and both deny the charges in that case. And the last, the dossier says Page met with 2 top Kremlin operatives and discussed bribes for working to lift economic sanctions. And Scarborough writes that Carter Page testified under oath that he never met or talked to those people. And Page has also filed libel lawsuits. And that's just some of the allegations that have never been verified in this phony dossier, although I understand people are being paid to try and verify it to this day. Now, yet, as the GOP memos have exposed, the bulk of that FISA application consisted of this unverified dossier, and James Comey and the FBI never bothered to verify it. Neither did Fusion GPS. Nobody verified it. We can't verify any of it to this day, although a lot has been proven false. Now, also breaking this hour, Byron York has a stunning report. Here's his headline. Comey told Congress the FBI agents didn't think Michael Flynn lied. And according to Byron York, during a March 2017 briefing to members of Congress, Comey said the FBI agents who interviewed Lieutenant General Michael Flynn did not think that he lied or that any inaccuracies in his statements were intentional. And then Comey added that the agents didn't think Flynn would be charged with a crime related to the interview. So then why months later was Flynn charged with the crime of lying to the FBI? Remember, it was Peter Strzok who, in fact, interviewed General Flynn. Now, that's a question we, the American people, you, the American people, deserve to know the answer to.